It's time for CIBL Biz Tips, bringing you actionable strategies to grow and improve your business. Prepare to become civilized.
What's up, Central Illinois? Welcome to CIBL Biz Tips, where we bring you concepts and strategies to grow your Central Illinois business. I'm Derek Hayden. I'm here with Garrett Ulmer. We're your hosts, and today's guest is Cari Rincker, the owner of Rincker Law, with locations in Shelbyville, Champaign, and I believe New York City. Is that right, Cari?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
For all you listeners, if you are a listener from the very beginning, Cari was like our number 5 guest ever on the show. So thanks for coming back, Cari.
Yeah, I'd love to be here. You guys do a great job.
Thank you very much. So, Cari, the reason we wanted to invite you on today was we have a lot of business owners, business leaders that listen. And one of the items that a lot of business owners want to learn about is, corporate entities, how to set up LLCs, or, basically just explaining the process. What is an LLC? So I guess that's where we'll hand it over to you. Cari, what is an LLC?
I love limited liability companies, but they can sometimes be confused with other types of business entities. It's actually a newer form of a business entity, sort of the old school corporation sort of morphed into this new business entity, LLC, which is sort of a hybrid between a partnership and a corporation. So, don't quiz me on this, but, I think it's only a couple decades old, and it certainly is very popular among entrepreneurs.
Perfect. Great. So why would a business owner or potential business owner want to consider an LLC?
There's a lot of different reasons to consider some type of a business entity that gives liability protection. Okay. And, I think a misconception that entrepreneurs have is that the minute that they are in business, that they need to have a limited liability company. That is incorrect. And, and I have been there. I started my law practice in my studio apartment on the Upper East Side in New York City. And, if I got sued for malpractice, I didn't have anything to my name. You want to take my sweater, but, as you build a business, you are building wealth. And it is important to go ahead and have that liability shield. Okay. Corporations offer it. Limited liability companies offer it, and so do limited partnerships. So to form one of those three, a great example illustration that came from actually an Iowa agriculture attorney, so I can't take credit for this. His name is Pat Dillon, but he talked about how a sole proprietorship in terms of dress code is like a whitey tighty shirt and jeans, right? So you're like a casual, business. And a limited liability company is a little bit more like business casual. Okay. And a corporation is like suit and tie. And the reason why I say that is because corporations just have a lot more administrative overhead than a limited liability company. So that's one of the many advantages that I have found for entrepreneurs with forming a limited liability company versus a corporation.
Perfect.
Great analogy.
Yes. It is a good analogy. That breaks it down for Garrett and Derek, the rednecks from Central Illinois. So
for sure.
So it sounds like there is added protection, legal protection for someone who is building their business. Explain that a little bit to us.
Yeah. So sometimes you'll refer to it as the corporate shield. Okay. So, somebody like me, for example, I've sold my farm now, but I used to own real estate. I have vehicles, I have other businesses, right? I have animals, livestock and things like that. And so Rincker Law would be sued. And this is a good example, is that Rincker Law actually does not own the building that Rincker Law is in. And I have formed a separate limited liability company for this very reason, because if Rincker Law is sued, I want the building asset to be kept separate. So similarly with farm businesses that I work with, I will suggest to them that their farm operating company have one limited liability company, and perhaps the owner of the land is a different entity. Perhaps it's a trust, or perhaps it's another limited liability company, but to keep that separate, to have that liability shield in case there is a lawsuit.
Perfect.
Great.
So to protect both sides, you almost recommend, it sounds like, if I'll use let's say someone who owns an apartment complex. So, or any real estate in general. So you could put the real estate, the actual building, in a certain LLC to protect the real estate. And then you're operating, where you are dealing with renters, tenants, where they're paying rent to, I would guess, would be a separate LLC, just to separate those and protect them each individually.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought up the analogy with real estate, because Illinois actually offers a special kind of limited liability company called a series LLC.
Okay.
And, there's different advantages and disadvantages with a series LLC, but, Illinois is rare in offering this. And I see this mostly with real estate. Perhaps there's an overarching like holding company, and then each parcel of land will have its own sort of subsidiary company.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Very
Wow.
nice. So there's a lot of options, it sounds like.
Mhm.
Now, you mentioned, as you were talking, explaining kind of the evolution of Rincker Law, and you said you don't really need, right off the bat, you may not need an LLC. At what point should a business owner start to really consider, okay, it's time to talk to Cari at Rincker Law about developing an LLC for my business?
Yeah, I think that once you realize that you have a business that's going to be in business for a while, right? I mean, I have some clients and even some friends that I would consider to be like serial entrepreneurs. And maybe in a sense, I'm also a little bit of a serial entrepreneur too, if you look at my business entities as well. But there is a cost in forming a limited liability company. So you do want to make sure that your entity has some traction to it. Okay. But it's a careful balance. There's no black and white rule on when you should form a limited liability company, but you should be considering some wealth that you want to protect, or maybe you just want to try to keep things separate. Okay. While keeping in mind that as you're growing your business, you're becoming busier and busier and busier and busier. So you almost want to get it formed before you reach that point of like, okay, now I've got so much to do. So, but you know that you have a viable business.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is it okay for an individual, say that, we see a lot of one-man bands that kind of start, they start their own HVAC business or plumbing business. So they start out as a sole proprietor. Can they transfer that in as they grow then, and then look at, moving that to an LLC then as they gain employees, grow assets, building, location, things like that?
Absolutely. So that would be a very common transition. Another common transition would even just be with a general partnership.
Okay. Yeah.
You see two people that are forming business together, that are sharing profits, but haven't formalized it, in any real way. And then they're like, hey, I think it's time that we form a limited liability company. And so they just make that transition. Now, when you form an LLC, one thing that you're going to need, or at least eventually you're going to need, is a federal employer identification number that you might not have had if you were a sole proprietorship. So that's something that would be new at that point in time, in addition to other corporate formalities such as an operating agreement.
Great. Perfect. Well, I think that's a good lead in for our second session. So we've reached about the 10-minute mark, Cari. You've done a great job of explaining what an LLC is, and maybe certain business owners that might need to consider an LLC. So everybody listening, if this interests you, stick around for next week in session 2. For session 1, I believe that's it. Garrett, anything else?
I don't think so. Great job, Cari. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
For all you followers of the CIBL podcast, make sure you are finding us on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can connect with Garrett and I personally there as well. While you're listening to this podcast on whatever your favorite podcast platform is, please leave us a review and subscribe. Until next time, y'all been civilized. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/CIBL podcast. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It's the civilized thing to do.